Shavua Tov, everyone, and Chodesh Tov. Welcome to Tillis Tells Stories for Saturday night. The title of this week's video is An Asset for Austria. I excerpted and copy edited from the book The Golden Dynasty by Israel Friedman. The Russian Tsar and various what were called maskilim, the intellectuals, the forerunners of the Reform Jewish movement, at that time were greatly distressed. By that time, meaning in the second quarter of the 19th century, they were greatly distressed by the power the holy Rhizhiner Rebbe wielded. He had tens of thousands of followers and admirers, and through his royal conduct, the Rebbe greatly uplifted the level of downtrodden masses. Royal conduct meaning he had a very large mansion, he wore very splendid clothing, Jewish clothing, but very, very high class. The Maskilim had long been plotting to bring down the Rebbe's downfall, but without any success. But then, when the Rebbe was 40 years old, he was arrested on charges of having had a hand in a murder. An informant brought evidence, so-called evidence, that the Rebbe had ordered the execution of another informer, a different informer. As the Rebbe was taken away into custody, he paraphrased Psalm 23, "Although I walk in the valley of the shadow of death," meaning even as I am about to be locked up, "I fear no evil. One thing, however, upsets me. You, God, will be with me. I'm being responsible for the Shekhinah, the manifestation of the divine presence, will also be in exile with me." That was his main concern. Rabbi Yisrael of Rizhiner, who passed away on the 3rd of Cheshvan, which is this Shabbos. This is his Yortzeit. He passed away in 1850. He was a great-grandson of the Maggid of Mezrich, the successor to the Baal Shem Tov. At a young age, he was already a charismatic leader with a large following of Hasidim. Greatly respected by the other Rebbes and Jewish leaders of his generation, he was and still is referred to as the Heilige Rizhiner, the Holy Rhizhiner Rebbe. He went to his heavenly reward on the third day of the Jewish month of Cheshvan, 1850, as I said. Today was his Yortzeit, and 6 of his sons established Hasidic dynasties, several of which, Sadigora, Biana, etc., are still thriving today. Following the orders of the Tsar himself, the Rebbe was imprisoned in the notorious Kiev dungeons. He spent 22 months locked away under terrible conditions in a small, dark, damp cellar. No charges were ever brought against him, nor was he ever put on trial. The Rebbe was then transferred to a second prison in Kamenetz for 6 months until he was finally freed on Shushan Purim. A few days after the Rebbe was freed, he was given a tip that the Tsar had decided to arrest him on charges of rebellion, because the Tsar considered him competition, and had already passed a sentence on him of life exile in Siberia. The Rebbe was left with no option but to flee Russia. As soon as the authorities realized that the Rhizhiner had disappeared, soldiers were sent to look for him and prevent his escape. But the Rebbe crossed the border into Austria in the middle of the night, thanks to near miraculous aid sent by Rabbi Meir of Przemyślan. That's a whole other story, and if you want to see it, it's on story number 660 on the Ascent website, or you can send me a request for the Word file. The Russians, having narrowly missed recapturing him, returned home empty-handed. The Russian Tsar, however, did not give up and demanded that Austria send the Rebbe back to Russia. They wanted to extradite him. Meanwhile, false witnesses were produced who testified that the Rebbe was really an Austrian citizen who had disappeared many years ago and had finally returned home to Austria. The Russians, however, also had false witnesses to contradict this story and insisted on his return. But the Australian government refused to comply. They knew that the Rebbe would attract tens of thousands of Hasidim, and this would greatly benefit the economy and businesses of the area. The Rebbe was simply too valuable an asset to lose. When the Rebbe Rabbi Yitzhak of Vorka came to visit the Rizhiner soon after he arrived in Austria, the Rebbe told him that he had not yet been in prison for his own sins, For his life had never been, for in his life he had never transgressed even the smallest rabbinical prohibition. The Rebbe settled in the town of Sadigor, on the Austrian side of the border, obviously. And some years earlier, the Rebbe Chaim of Kosovo had promised the people of the town that one day a great tzaddik would come to live there, and he would make the name Sadigor famous for all generations. This prophecy became realized when once again the Rizhiner set up a magnificent court with a big shul. Tens of thousands flocked to Sadigor, and indeed the people of the area became his chassidim. The Rebbe lived in Sadigor for 10 years until his passing. A few months before he passed away, he started to drop broad hints of his imminent departure. Just before Rosh Hashanah, in 5611, in 1850, he told his sons that he had prepared extremely beautiful living quarters for himself, and he would be moving there after the high holiday season was over. As he walked to his place of study and prayer, as he walked there on Yom Kippur, he put his hand on the mezuzah and announced that he would be a kapara, an atonement for the Jewish people. 2 weeks later, right after Simchas Torah, the Rebbe became ill, and 1 week after that passed away on the 3rd of the Jewish month of Cheshvan. A few hours before he passed on, he asked one of his close chassidim if he knew what Queen Esther prayed before she risked her life to go to Achashverosh. From the Megillah Esther itself, we know that she prayed, but we don't know what she prayed, really. Without waiting for a response, the Rebbe answered his own question. She asked God that he either help the Jews or take her from this world. The Rebbe's last words before his departure were, Rebbe, referring to Rabbi Yehuda Hanasi, the redactor of the Mishnah, Rebbe testified about himself that he never had enjoyment from this world, not even the amount of a small finger. And I testify on myself that I didn't enjoy this world, not even the amount of a bit of thread. The reason for my grand and royal conduct and living conditions were totally for the sake of heaven. Wow, Zikron Tzaddik Lebracha, may his memory and his merits stand us in good stead. May we be inspired, and may we be inspired like him to do mitzvah and study Torah primarily because the Creator of all wishes so, and not solely for personal benefit or ego strokes. Shvua Tov, Chodesh Tov, and Shana Tova.